Good day and welcome back to Elementary 72 Gaming. Before I get into this video, I'd like to ask you all to please leave a like or comment on my video, consider subscribing to my channel, and if you dislike the content, please leave a comment. Now, today's video is going to complete the PvP PvE discussion, and that is now discussing Deadspace. Now, Deadspace is a very difficult activity within the current aspect of the game. I'd say it holds a higher difficulty level than a T10 mission, and that's because of the ships that are present within a Deadspace. And the ships which I'm talking about are your faction class vessels. Now, it is possible to complete the higher level Deadspaces, and activities going through them are really difficult. However, the gains from the higher levels generally aren't able to be sold. Example, the Rattlesnake battleship and so forth. You do get their blueprints out if you go and you face off a high level Deadspace within the right faction. And what you're going to get out of it is a blueprint to craft a ship. Now, this isn't a guaranteed drop, but it does drop on occasion. And things like Gilas, Cinnables, Phantasms are all very important vessels for the game. Now, playing with any one of them will give you a much better aspect of play with your cruisers. And the fact that your cruisers have a lot more research pumped into them because of how long you've been playing with them. If you had continued to master your cruisers, you're going to have a very powerful ship. It's going to be more powerful than the battle cruisers are at current, even with a skill reallocation. Because skill reallocating into the battle cruiser isn't going to give you everything perfect for your battle cruiser builds. Your battle cruisers run more low slot than the faction frigates, not faction frigates, sorry, than the faction cruisers, and that's where the advantage disappears. Your faction cruiser is about the same level as your battle cruiser. Now, the reason for this is they have higher health, higher power, and much better stat bonuses when it comes to their vessels. I have discussed the faction cruisers before, and this is the reason why they are so tough to play. Now, when it comes to a faction frigate versus a battle cruiser, the battle cruiser generally wins, because when the faction frigate crosses too close to the battle cruiser, they generally double web and assault, and that generally pulls out all of the velocity of your little frigate, which may be moving up to 3000 meters per second, and that's an instant death to the frigate when it loses double of its regular resistance. A heavy hit from a battle cruiser will definitely take out the shield and part of the armor. And if you are very unlucky, they can hit you 2 or 3 times without any miss or without any delay between hits, and your ship is totally destroyed. Now, going on from this whole aspect, we have the whole aspect of playing a Deadspace. Is Deadspace a PvP activity or a PvE activity? Now, with all due respect, even though the activity is the same difficulty as PvP battles, it is a PvE activity. Now, PvE players complain about the fact that they can lose loot to PvP fleets if they come in and attack them. However, I don't see the problem in this. They already knew the risk they were taking, and they're most likely going to complete 4 or 5 of these Deadspaces before a proper PvP fleet comes in to try and take them on. So they have a chance to upgrade their ships over a few days by building up a faction class vessel, and then coming back and continuously farming with the higher level vessel. So how does it progress for you as a regular player to play in these activities? Number 1, on the first level, the opponents are slightly easier than the lower levels of the higher levels of the Deadspace. So when you play in the first level, a PvP format may be viable. However, when you're playing in the third and fourth level, I'm not counting the second level in this here, the third and fourth level, PvP disruptors become a waste of a slot on your vessel. So it's always good to use a PvE format to fight these enemies. So that's things such as Webfires, Norse, and Webfire, Norse, and what is the other one? I'm forgetting what was the other mod slot you could equip. But nonetheless, that's what you're going to equip on your nice big ships. That's your Cyclones and so forth, because you're going to need big ships with high resistance to damage and the ability to really dish out quite a bit of damage. Now what this is going to overall do for you is give you a chance to fight back in terms of gameplay and let you go one step further in actual combat. And for example, if you're going to take on a Deadspace T7 and you're going to play it with cruisers, you're going to have to jump in and out of that mission constantly because of the faction class vessels. You're going to have to take out the smaller vessels and the easier to kill vessels, and it's going to take you a matter of hours to complete it, as opposed to running in with battle cruisers who can tank the hits for several seconds and destroy the ships at the same time. So even though it seems like a very fair fight, the faction level of those encounters does play a massive effect in terms of battle. Now moving on from the PvE play within it, there comes the PvP play of the Deadspace. Now a Deadspace will not despawn the moment someone reaches the final level and kills everything. That is provided someone is in one of the levels that move through the Deadspace. And a very good PvP tactic is to actually position a ship in the PvP Deadspace at one of the levels after it's been cleared. That's because the difficulty in taking on an opponent and the faction ships within it is very difficult. So you go in after a PvE fleet has cleaned it out, and you hide on the first level or the second level, hoping that someone will jump in an attempt to complete the Inquisitor, Scout, or your Deadspace. Now I did put Inquisitors and Scouts in it because they have the same mechanism of jumping in. Now at the level where they first jump in, they jump into one fixed point regardless of who it is. So all you've got to do if you're a PvP player is set up a camp inside the Deadspace. Now going into the Deadspace is very difficult, and there's a strong chance of you losing your ship regardless of how good you are at play. So if someone is losing their ship within a Deadspace on that first level, it isn't really unfair play, it's fair play. And the fact that players have asked for notification to say whether there's enemies inside an anomaly or not is something which can be controversial. Now for PvE players it becomes a big problem, for PvP players it is a big problem, and it is also a benefit to PvP players. So it may be taken out of the meta to allow for everybody to have a fair chance to choose their fights. And this will be done in the next few weeks after the test server comes down. We'll find out about people complaining about the Deadspaces a little bit more. Now the reason why people have been complaining about the Deadspaces is camps being set up inside the Deadspace taking out expensive ships. Obviously when you lose an expensive ship, you're more likely to complain than when you lose a cheap ship. Example, if I lose my CNI again over my current Cyclone, I won't really worry because my CNI with all of its fittings is only about 1/5 the value of my current Cyclone, and my current Cyclone is already over 400 million in value just in fittings on it alone, and that's just with the rigs, and the rigs aren't yet even complete. There's another 300 million to go on it. So overall that's how expensive my Cyclone is just in the rigs in the bottom. Now once I complete all the fittings, it's going to be even more expensive, and it should be capping out at around 2 billion ISK in value. And the value of the, sorry about that, I'm getting a little bit distracted, I haven't been reading my notes. And the value of my CNI is going to be less than 1/5 of that value, so it's only about 200 million in value. It's something I can easily replace. So that is the difference between the two ships. If I lost my Cyclone to the enemies, I'll be very upset, especially with the fact that they're gaining the direct ISK from the kill. Now here's something else which PvE players are complaining about. When you take on PvE enemies, you don't get the value of the fittings they are running. So if you take on, say for example, a Cinnabal with Seek type weapons, so forth, the value of the ship standard on the market for the Cinnabal is 1.7 billion. When you kill the Cinnabal, you're only getting about 10 billion reward, and it's being split up amongst the players within your fleet. It is unfair because when someone destroys your Cinnabal, which costs you 1.7 billion to set up, which is the exact same ship you just destroyed, you don't have them receiving a 1% of the actual value of the ship. And this is to say that it isn't fair in the long-term play of the game. or even with it being 20 or 30%, it still isn't fair. They need to increase the gain that PvE players get from taking on PvE enemies. And this isn't just one time in this one activity. The same goes for missions. You take out an opponent with a 30 million ISK piece of equipment on him, and you get a 5,000 ISK reward because it's on a small ship. You take out a big ship with a 30 million piece of gear on it, and you're only getting 2 million. The rewards don't match up. You should get that piece of equipment because they're using that equipment. So anything which is activated in the fight should be dropped for you in RNG, or the reward for destroying that type of equipment should be given to you via RNG. Now, all of this being said, there are multiple parts to the entire fight that have to be taken into consideration. You see, this is one part where players don't like the balance between PvP and PvE. A PvP opponent gains the full value of your ship. So if they kill you and your ship has 400 million worth of fittings and equipment on it, which is destroyed, they gain 400 million plus whatever is left over. If you fight an opponent with a 5 million play up and setup, you get 5 million. However, PvE, if you play an opponent with a 2 billion setup, you get 10 million or 20 million. The gain isn't fair in comparison to the opponent taken on. If you take on a 2 billion Cinnabar, you should sorry about that. If you take on a Cinnabar with 2 billion, you should be able to get at least 200 million ISK as your reward, and that should be broken up into your fleet immediately. And honestly, I'm still reducing it by way too much. The reduction in percentage shouldn't be 10%. You should gain 100% just like the PvP players. PvP and PvE gain should be identical because both sets of players can do it. And it will bring a better benefit to playing the PvE faction in the game. And it means that players won't mind when they face off against an enemy who's warp disrupting them and they don't get the warp disruptor at the end of the entire fight. So that is one of the major complaints when it comes to the PvP PvE combat situation. Now there are multiple aspects that go on. As I said, this argument and the whole topic of where it's fair and unfair can go on for days. They either need to reduce the gain from taking on PvP enemies, or they need to increase the gain from taking on PvE enemies. And that is basically what I've been saying throughout this entire video. So thank you all for watching. Have a good day.